For a man who ran a multi-billion-dollar biotech empire, Nathaniel Nate Carter was surprisingly ill-equipped at managing one thing: his personal life. In the glass-walled corner office of Carter Labs' Manhattan headquarters, he stared at his mother's latest email with a rare sense of helplessness. Vivian Carter was planning to turn his younger sister Allison's wedding into a covert matchmaking event where she would casually introduce a few well-bred, Ivy League-approved young women. As if that wasn't enough, Nate's ex-girlfriend, Serena Blake, was also attending, as a special guest on the bride's side. "Nate, you need a solution," his assistant Megan said bluntly. "Not just a date. A strategy." He paused, calculating like he was pitching a merger. "Hire someone, temporary, to pose as my fiancé." She arrived on a drizzly afternoon. No designer dress, no luxury handbag, just a simple blue midi dress and a confident gaze. Elena Morales wasn't the type of woman Nathaniel Carter had envisioned when he agreed to let Megan, his assistant, recruit a temporary fiancé. But clearly she wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. Inside the sleek, minimalist penthouse on Park Avenue, Nate stood ready, holding a thick folder. Carter family background, a fabricated meet-cute at an art auction, key dates to memorize. But when Elena stepped off the private elevator, one look at her made every rehearsed line in his mind disappear. She was beautiful in a way that felt effortless and alive. Her chestnut hair fell naturally to her shoulders. Her forest-hued brown eyes were alert and clear. No heavy makeup, just a sheer pink gloss and natural color on her cheeks. But what stopped Nate in his tracks was the look in her eyes. Sharp, intelligent, and faintly challenging. When he handed her the folder and asked her to memorize the script, Elena skimmed a few pages, then looked up with an unreadable smile. "Honestly," she said, "if we're pretending we met at an art auction, wouldn't a spilled coffee on your fancy shirt be more memorable than a mutual gaze across the room?" Nate looked up, startled. For the first time in years, someone corrected him, and made sense. A brief but spirited debate followed. Together they rewrote the story. Less dramatic, more spontaneous, a touch of humor. When Elena finally smiled, Nate realized his perfect plan had just developed a crack, and that crack might lead to something he couldn't control. The Lakewood Lakeside Resort looked like something out of a fairy tale under the fading afternoon sun. Historic stone buildings, sweeping green lawns, and a still lake mirroring the golden sky. Elena stepped out of the sleek black car beside Nate, dressed in a simple aquamarine silk dress. Nothing flashy, but quietly captivating. Nate, ever composed, wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo. Together, they looked like a flawless couple, at least on the surface. Inside the grand hall where the Carter family had gathered, laughter, hugs, and congratulations filled the air, until a brief hush fell when Nate walked in with his mystery fiancé. "Allison?" Nate smiled, embracing his sister before turning to introduce Elena. "This is Elena, my partner." Allison grinned and hugged Elena warmly. "You're beautiful, and definitely not what Mom described." Elena chuckled. "I hope that's a good thing." Just then, a colder voice chimed in from behind. "Well, you certainly know how to keep a secret." Vivian Carter stepped forward, elegant in a Chanel coat, her gaze sharp as glass. "Elena Morales, was it? And what do you do?" "I'm a freelance illustrator, ma'am," Elena replied calmly. "Ah, the arts," Vivian arched an eyebrow. "How charming." That evening, Elena artfully dodged the financial and family questions Vivian posed, steering the conversation toward literature, culture, and children's books. Nate, seated beside her, silently admired her finesse, until Serena Blake entered, draped in a curve-hugging red dress, lips to match, smile icy. She greeted Nate a little too warmly, then turned to Elena. "Oh, the new girlfriend? Hello, Morales, very creative." Elena kept her smile polite. "Pleasure to meet you, Serena." The game had begun. Over the next few days, cocktail parties, lakeside dinners, late-night receptions, Elena and Nate had to act like a deeply in-loved couple, holding hands, exchanging loving glances, dancing under candlelight. At first, it was stiff. Nate wasn't used to emotional displays in public, and Elena wasn't comfortable lying. But slowly, each gesture became more natural. At the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding, when Allison pulled them onto the dance floor, Nate found himself surprised. Elena moved with effortless grace. "You dance beautifully," he said, genuinely impressed. "My grandma taught me when I was little," she smiled. "She said dancing is storytelling without words." In that moment, between soft music and golden lights, their eyes met. Not as actors, but as two real people, feeling something that had nothing to do with the script. The wedding unfolded under a clear blue sky, late summer sunlight glittering off the lake. Allison, radiant in her white gown, was surrounded by applause, laughter, and happy tears. Elena stood beside Nate, hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, smiling as if they truly belonged together. But inside, peace was only a fragile illusion. Moments earlier, Elena had overheard Serena's voice behind the break room door. "Relax," Serena sneered into her phone. "I know her weak spot. A rundown little bookstore in Brooklyn. I've got proof Nate paid her. Drop it at the right moment and she'll be out of here in minutes." Elena's blood ran cold. She wanted to run to Nate to confess, but pride and fear held her back. She didn't want to confirm the worst suspicion, that she was a hired problem. By afternoon, the reception was in full swing. While Elena was reaching for a glass of lemonade at the bar, Serena approached, smiling darkly. "We need to talk, Morales, or should I say, actress?" Elena turned, keeping her voice steady. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, cut the act," Serena hissed, shoving her phone toward Elena. A screenshot of emails between Megan and the recruiter who found Elena. Payment details, terms, everything. Just then, Nate appeared. He'd been watching Serena from across the garden, and something in her body language had warned him. Seeing Elena's pale face, he stepped in immediately. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice calm but tight. Serena whirled to him, triumphant. "He's a fraud. This is proof you hired her. It's all a cheap lie." Gasps murmured through the nearby crowd. Vivienne approached, brows furrowed. All eyes turned to them. Elena stood frozen, her hands slightly trembling. Nate looked at her, then at Serena. Then at his mother. A beat of silence. Then his voice rang out, clear, firm, without hesitation. "Serena, you're wrong." The entire courtyard hushed. "Elena isn't lying to anyone," he continued. "Yes, how we started may have been unconventional, but my feelings for her, they're real." He stepped forward and took Elena's hand. "I love Elena Morales," he said, looking directly at his mother. "And I'm proud she's here with me, not because of a contract, because I want her here, with all that I am." Elena's breath caught. For the first time in her life, someone stood up for her, not out of duty, but from love. That night, the resort gradually sank into silence. The music, laughter, and chaos of the wedding had faded, leaving only the wind brushing across the lake and the moonlight glinting on its still surface. Nate and Elena walked slowly together along the stone path beside the water. No crowds, no prying eyes. They were quiet for a long time, not from awkwardness, but because there was too much to feel. Elena spoke first. Her voice was soft, still a little unsteady from emotion. "What you said this afternoon, in front of everyone, are you sure?" Nate stopped walking. The moonlight softened the sharp angles of his face. "I'm sure," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "Every single word." He exhaled, letting go of the polished CEO mask for the first time. "I know this all started with a lie, a selfish plan to protect myself, but these past few days, pretending to be your partner, I realized I wasn't pretending anymore." Elena looked at him, eyes glistening. She saw sincerity in his gaze, not the calculated charm of a businessman, but the raw honesty of a man speaking from the heart. "Me too, Nate," she whispered. "I'm drawn to you, Not because of the CEO title or the glitter around you, but because of how you protected me. Because of the moments when I saw your loneliness, when no one else did." She hesitated, then added, "But our worlds, they're so different. I don't know if what we have can really survive outside this weekend of make-believe." Nate nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. "This is what you're owed from our agreement. Use it to save your bookstore." He placed the check in her hand. "But I hope this isn't the end. I want a real chance. No more contracts, no more roles, just me and you." When they returned to New York, everything snapped back to its usual rhythm. For Elena, it meant a small Brooklyn apartment, a worn-out bookstore filled with memories and stacks of unfinished illustration commissions. For Nate, it meant back-to-back meetings at Carter Labs, quarterly forecasts, profit margins, and the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Elena used the check he'd given her to renew the lease, started repainting shelves, fixing window panes, and sketching ideas for weekend storytime events. She worked tirelessly, not just for the money, but because stopping meant having to feel. Meanwhile, Nate's days remained full, but the emptiness crept in during quiet moments. The vast penthouse felt colder. The room where he and Elena had once rewritten their art auction love story now echoed with absence. He missed her smile, the spark in her eyes when she talked about art, and the quiet comfort of simply being near her. They called a few times, mostly short, simple conversations. About the bookstore, about work. Neither mentioned emotions. Neither dared to say the word feelings. Nate knew words wouldn't be enough. Elena wasn't someone to be persuaded. She was someone to be felt, someone to be shown. If he truly wanted her to believe in something real, he'd have to go beyond phone calls. One Saturday afternoon, instead of golfing or attending a charity gala, Nate took off his tailored suit, got in his car, and drove across the city toward Brooklyn. No flowers, no warning, no speeches. Just showing up, because he missed her. And for the first time, he didn't want distance anymore. Nate parked his car a few blocks away. He didn't want to draw attention with his luxury sports car in the artsy, modest neighborhood of Brooklyn. The golden light of a Saturday afternoon filtered through the old trees, casting soft shadows on the weathered sign. Story and Light Bookstore. The front door was ajar. A gentle jazz tune floated from inside. Through the dusty window, he saw Elena struggling with an old wooden bookshelf, wearing paint-stained overalls, her hair tied in a loose bun. She frowned in concentration, slightly hunched over, determination radiating from her, along with that same natural glow that always left him speechless. Nate took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The bell chimed softly. Elena turned, startled to see him. "Nate? What are you doing here?" "I was passing by," he said with a quiet smile, "and thought maybe you could use an extra pair of hands for the shelf." Without waiting for an answer, he walked over, rolled up the sleeves of his navy sweater, and began inspecting the loose bracket. Elena froze for a moment, then let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "All right," she said, a soft smile breaking through her guarded expression. "You hold that end. I'll fix the bolt." Together, they repaired the old shelf. At first, there was silence, focused on the task. Then, slowly, laughter slipped in, small jokes, shared glances. When the shelf finally stood tall and stable again, they sat on the floor, among stacks of worn books, sweaty and tired, but with a softness in their eyes that hadn't been there before. No contracts, no roles, just two people choosing to stay. A few months later, the little bookstore in Brooklyn had taken on a new life. Still old-fashioned, but cozy, organized and full of warmth. Weekend storytime events drew local families. The online bookstore, quietly supported by Carter Labs, began generating steady income for Elena. Vivian Carter occasionally called her son, her tone softer now. Once, she even asked, cautiously, "That little artist, is she still around?" Allison and her husband became regular visitors, often bringing pastries and smiles. On a gentle late autumn afternoon, sunlight streamed through the bookstore's large front windows. Nate and Elena sat together in the reading nook. He flipped through a children's picture book, the illustrations unmistakably hers. Elena leaned on his shoulder, sketching his portrait in her notebook, a quiet smile playing on her lips. Nate closed the book and looked over at her. "I think," he murmured, "hiring you might have been the smartest decision I've ever made." Elena laughed, lifting her gaze to meet his, eyes shining. "And loving me," she replied, "was the best personal one." On the first snowy morning of winter, Brooklyn looked like it had been wrapped in a soft white blanket. Quiet, serene, magical. At Story and Light, Elena unlocked the door as usual, but something felt different. No usual customers waiting, no clutter. In the center of the room, a stack of books had been carefully arranged in the shape of a heart, with a small navy velvet box placed right in the middle. She reached for it, just as Nate stepped out from behind the shelves, wearing a dark coat and a nervous, hopeful smile. "I couldn't think of a better place than the very room where I first realized you weren't part of the plan. You were the plan," he said, walking slowly toward her. Elena turned, her breath catching. Nate knelt down, took the box from her shaking hands, and opened it to reveal a delicate, timeless ring. Simple, elegant, just like her. His voice barely trembled as he spoke. "Marry me, Elena. Let's write the rest of our story. No scripts, no lines, just life. Real life." "Elena Morales," he whispered. "You walked into my life as part of a script, but became the only real thing I've ever needed. Will you write the rest of this story with me? No pretending, no ending." Tears welled up in her eyes, but her smile beamed through. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, more than anything." 3 years later, their cozy Brooklyn apartment had become a real home. The bookstore still stood, now hosting weekly storytime sessions where Nate read aloud and Elena taught weekend art classes to children, her sketchpad never far from reach. Laughter echoed through the rooms. Their twin toddlers, Liam and Rosie, filled every corner with joy. Liam was curious and mischievous, with Nate's sparkling eyes. Rosie was gentle, always sketching or flipping through books. Elena, in miniature, Vivian, the once imposing matriarch, now read bedtime stories every night. Sometimes she would pause and watch her grandchildren's faces light up, her voice softer than anyone thought possible. One night, as she closed a book, she whispered to herself, "She's the best thing that ever happened to him." Allison stopped by regularly, arms full of pastries and affection. One crisp autumn afternoon, sunlight poured through the bookstore windows. Nate wrapped his arms around Elena from behind as they watched the kids run in circles. "I think," he murmured, "this might be the best chapter we've ever written." Elena leaned into him, fingers entwined with his. "And it's not even over yet," she whispered, smiling.